Watching Liquid Lunch on Newsmax TV. I'm Frank Morano. Happy Cyber Monday. John Tabacco is in Miami right now, eagerly trying with all of our technical wizardry to connect to us right now. Will he be successful? Will he not be successful? That's the drama of Liquid Lunch. You just never know. People are scheduled. They might be there. They might not be there. People are remote. They might connect. They might not connect. We're all left wondering, and that's why you really can't flip the channel, because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know who's going to be on the show, whether they're scheduled or not. So we'll see. We certainly hope he'll be able to join us shortly. Now, a ton of interesting items in the news, and we're going to get to it. But I'm very excited. Coming up in hour two, we have one of my oldest friends in the world, Richard Bey. Now, Richard Bey was on this show the very first week that it existed. And you'll remember, he was on with Kevin McCullough and John. This was before John really got his hosting chops down. And John was thinking he was a guest, even though he's supposed to be the host. So Richard Bey is almost in this handicap match with John and Kevin. And they made a bet at John's urging, and this was back in May, and it went a little something like this. All right. Well, no, it didn't go a little something like that. But you will see a little bit later what that bet was, and we'll get Richard Bey to respond, and we'll let you know who won the bet. Now, a ton of other interesting items in the news. The president is on his way to London, very apropos, because there was just a terror attack in London, a stabbing over the holiday weekend. Hopefully you had a nice holiday weekend and were not involved in any stabbings or anything like that. I ate way too much, as I'm sure some of you can relate to, and now I'm going to try my best for the day to abstain from alcohol. Because you ever notice the alcohol packs on the pounds real quick? Because not only is it all empty calories, but you end up eating and being a lot less careful with what you're eating. So the president's on the way to London for the NATO summit. Now, this is going to be interesting to see how the rest of the world reacts to NATO, because you have two dynamics playing out right now in Great Britain. One, you have the president's repeated quest to get NATO to pay its fair share. A lot of these NATO countries, especially countries like Germany, they enjoy the benefits of being in NATO, but they much prefer the United States just paying their fair share. And the president has worked hard to change that formula. Some countries have started to step up. For those of you that aren't familiar with the NATO funding formula, there's a certain percentage of that country's GDP that you have to put forward towards common defense. I am sort of the belief that Donald Trump stated during the 2016 campaign, that NATO has largely become an obsolete institution. And the Cold War is over. And I see very little reason why we should be risking American blood and treasure to defend a country like Montenegro, which, again, nothing against the what do you call somebody from Montenegro? The Montenegrians? So we'll look at that, what someone from Montenegroan? I don't know. Montenegroni? I don't know. But we don't know what they're called, but I have nothing against them. But how vital is Montenegro to America's defense? But unfortunately, being part of NATO says that if they're attacked and they invoke the Article 5 provisions, the United States is bound by treaty to defend them. Now, as promised, here is that discussion between Richard Bey and John Tabacco from back in May. Have a look at this.
This is over, and then they start a new investigation.
Well, the investigation into Donald Trump is over. Now
we have
the
a new
weaponization of the Justice Department as a political tool investigation is on.
No.
And you know who's going to go to jail?
We are now weaponizing.
You know who's going to go to jail? Brennan, Clapper,
you want
hopefully
bet?
Comey.
Hey,
yeah, let's bet $1,000.
Right,
One of them
$1,000 right here.
Pleads guilty or goes to jail.
Clapper
yes.
and Comey are not going
to
jail.
I just bet
okay?
him $1,000.
And let's put a time frame on it right now.
Let's give it 3 months.
3 months. Okay.
Let's give it
Clapper
3
and
months.
Comey going to jail.
We'll bring some-
$1,000.
We'll let the
on it.
audience
And you know
decide.
what? $1,000 means a lot to me. For him, it's what he gives.
Oh, for him.
For him, it's what he gives the guy in the toilet room when he washes his hands.
You know what?
That's what we call John Tobacco's Mitt Romney moment. You remember when Romney stuck out his hand and offered Rick Perry a $10,000 bet? Do you remember that? And then all of a sudden people started realizing, whoa, wait a minute, maybe Mitt Romney is not the same kind of ordinary guy that we are. Not that John is an ordinary, although in many ways he's extraordinary, but John was wrong about that. So when Richard is here later, if we ever connect with John, we'll see if John is going to pay up on that $1,000 bet. It's going to be quite interesting. But speaking of money, that is precisely what I am speaking, frankly, about. So do you realize how much money the government is spending? You know, it's a number that's so large, the federal government I'm talking about, that it really doesn't even make sense for me to outline what they're spending. But here's the important part of it. We are not spending, as a government, anything close to what we're taking in. We're spending far more. Right now, as it stands now, you take conservative estimates, you take wild estimates, we have trillion-dollar deficits as a country as far as the eye can see. $1 trillion. Can you imagine how big $1 trillion is? So what does that mean? And you try this in your household. The United States government is spending $1 trillion more, sorry, Mr. President, $1 trillion more than it takes in taxes and other revenues. $1 trillion more. Now, how much longer can this continue? That means $1 trillion gets added to the national debt each year. Now, the national debt is already larger than the entire GDP of our country. And I'll tell you, just to illustrate this, we are spending hundreds of billions of dollars, at least $300 billion a year in interest payments on the national debt. Think of that. That's $300 billion or so every year that's washed down the toilet. It's not used to pay one soldier. It's not used to build one highway. It's not used to pay one federal employee. It's gone just to service this mammoth debt. Now, we have two things going for us that kind of mask this problem. One, we have very low interest rates. Now, and they just got lower. But those interest rates are eventually going to tick up. And that means that number of what we're spending on the debt is going to tick up right with it. Additionally, the economy is good right now. So people are making money, they're paying taxes, and the government's doing well in terms of tax receipts. What happens, as always happens, if there's an economic downturn? We're going to be in real trouble. And the only reason I mention this is because I was at a lot of family functions and different parties over the weekend. We had our liquid lunch party here on Thanksgiving Eve. Then I went to 2 Thanksgivings on Thursday. I went to my mother's, then went to my mother-in-law's. Thank you, everybody. A great time. Enjoyed everybody's meals. Then on Friday, I had something else. I was at a wedding on Friday. Saturday, I went to my cousin Natalie's surprise 50th birthday in Bethlehem. So I was in 3 states. 3 different places. And all people love to chat about politics. They love to argue about politics. They love to try and rope me into their conversation. And you know what? The one issue nobody was talking about? Conservatives, liberals, libertarians, vegetarians, and I was with all those people. The one issue that not one person brought up was the national debt and the fact that we are now in the era of trillion-dollar deficits. Why is no one in Washington talking about this? Now, the Republicans aren't talking about it because they just want more and more tax cuts. Doesn't matter that our spending number keeps going up. They want to keep cutting taxes, even though that'll mean, in spite of what some people think, that will mean less revenue for the federal government. Democrats won't talk about it because they want to spend more money. Even the so-called moderate Democrats, Joe Biden and Pete Buttigieg, they want to dramatically increase spending on things like education and health care. So if the Republicans won't comment on it because they love tax cuts, and the Democrats won't comment on it because they love increased spending on social welfare programs, who, where, how, Why is there no discussion of the national debt and the deficits as an issue? I wish there was some candidate for office on the federal level, even on the local level, that actually seemed to care about the national debt. I'm left thinking, Ross Perot, where are you? Ross Perot was going nuts when the debt was a fraction of what it is now. Now we're over $20 trillion in debt, and we're putting on $1 trillion every single year. And we're not going to get out of this anytime soon because no one seems to give a damn. So I have a big problem with it. And I hope when different candidates for different offices come asking for your vote, you'll say, well, what are you going to do to rein in the national debt and to reduce deficit spending? Because the one thing that's very clear out of Washington, the Democrats don't care and the Republicans don't care. That's why some of us have been working very hard over the years for a third party focused on things like fiscal reform and electoral reform. So we'll see where it goes. So we have an action-packed show for you. Coming up next, he really raised a lot of eyebrows the last time he was here, and we're hoping to avoid bleeping him this time. Jeffrey Lichtman will be here. Now, Jeffrey Lichtman is a distinguished criminal defense attorney. He's represented a lot of high-profile clients, people like John Gotti Jr., people like El Chapo, a number of clients. And he's also, as a kind of his hobby, a very, very passionate advocate and fierce critic of terrorism. Now, there's not many people that aren't critical of terrorism, but Jeffrey has a way of expressing that criticism in a way that can be at times very entertaining, other times very educational, and at all times always make you raise your eyebrow. I'm eager to get his take on what happened in London and where we are with Mike Bloomberg's presidential candidacy. Because if you've watched any amount of TV today, you have probably seen about a dozen Mike Bloomberg for President commercials. He is spending big time. And you're not going to believe what Mike Bloomberg said in an interview that he did on Firing Line with Margaret Hoover. It had me scratching my head and wondering what show I was watching. Presidential historian Doug Wead is going to be here. He's got a book the president was just tweeting about yesterday. And if we ever do regain control with John Tabacco or are able to talk with him, John has quite a bit to say about things that he's experienced over the weekend. Manny Alejandro will be here, and the former First Lady of Florida, Carol Christ, will be here in our second hour. You are watching Liquid Lunch on Newsmax TV. I'm Frank Morano. Jeffrey Lichtman joins us next. We'll be right back. No flipping.